We noted in the very beginning that advertising was a major customer for the illustrator's skills, and many long-term relationships between the illustrator and the advertiser were forged. With photography and film, we rarely see exceptional artwork representing the client. Like this brilliant interpretation for General Electric of Thomas Edison inventing the light bulb, a painting that would proudly hang in any museum. The illustrator, Dean Cornwell's extraordinary output of work created a group of younger illustrators, loosely referred to as the Cornwell School. Often, the reference to the product advertised is somewhat lost in the quality of the artwork. Here, can you find it? Look closely. It's ivory soap for Procter & Gamble, and the soap is on the corner of the sink. This image is apparently circa 1900. Perhaps even harder to spot, this relaxing young lady is holding a refreshing glass of something. Examine it carefully. It's Coca-Cola. Both images require very clear copy for the viewer to make any clear connection with the product being advertised. Sometimes the illustrator's image is so delightful, as in Ice Cream Break. The viewer of this 1951 Saturday Evening Post ad will stop, absorb it, and maybe even get a chuckle out of it. When there's a requirement to actually think for a moment to get it, the illustrator really has to make the message work. A wonderfully surprised expression on the young ham radio operator's face supports the thrill of hearing a voice from a long distance, while Esso's message is, with our gas, you'll get long-distance mileage as well. You do have to work at that a little bit. Sometimes it's interesting to see the illustrator's preliminary drawing as it will fit in the finished layout, as in this Delco battery ad. Industrial advertising is a puzzle. It must have exceptional artwork, like this remarkable painting, but for what purpose? The title, New Method for Steel Making, it may justify the expense, but the most the viewer might get is, well, this company is a leader, it's an innovator, but what was the name of that company again? Here's another example for a company that manufactures heavy equipment. A compelling image. It appears the seated figure actually has a copy of the blueprints beside him. What could this compelling, high-quality image entitled Committee Examining the Recast Liberty Bell possibly relate to? The advertiser is Continental Distillery Corporation. That doesn't appear to answer the question. Well, digging deeper, the Liberty Bell is in Philadelphia, and so is the distillery. With a colorful and long history of success, including being the only American distillery to significantly expand its business during the Prohibition. How does that happen? Think about it. I'm sure the accompanying copy explains it all. During the war years, manufacturers frequently used military imagery to emphasize their patriotic contribution. This picture is the rearward firing gunner in a Douglas Dauntless, advertised by Western Electric. Using the same strategy, General Motors employed Dean Cornwell to illustrate this piece, advertised and entitled Strato Flak, depicting anti-aircraft installations. Literature, especially the classics, were significantly enhanced when illustrated by artists that often achieved household name status. All sorts of inefficient and poor quality color printing was developed, but reliable and affordable color printing to accompany the growing volume of classic novels became available around the 1890s or so. This grouping of 6 novels of the day, all prominently announced, illustrated by N.C. Wyeth. Here's a close-up of some of his masterpieces. Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Last of the Mohegans by James Fenimore Cooper. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. And Courting of Miles Standish by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Wyeth's output was legendary. Acknowledged as a giant in the world of illustration, he still suffered bouts of depression and belief that illustration, quote, was a lesser art form than easel painting. This work is by Edwin Austin Abbey, illustrating a scene in Shakespeare's Richard III. Among the best pen and ink illustrators of the 1880s, his friend John Singer Sargent convinced him at age 40 to pursue oil painting. He succeeded wildly. This elegant image may or may not have been a commission piece to illustrate a narrative. It's hard to tell. This dramatic composition was executed 150 years after Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick, based on his own experience as a common sailor. This illustration appeared in a Barnes & Noble publication in 1996. Continuing with Fictions of the Sea, the first of a series about Captain Horatio Hornblower was published in 1939, written by C.S. Forester. I'm sure for both of these seafaring tales, there were several earlier illustrator portrayals of the featured characters, encouraging the creativity of the respective illustrators to create a new look. Called by William Faulkner the father of American literature, Mark Twain grabbed the American heart when he wrote The Adventures of Tom Sawyer in 1876. This effort to capture the Tom Sawyer spirit has him whitewashing a fence, printed by Harper Brothers in 1910. The other half of Mark Twain's masterpiece is Huck Finn, wonderfully portrayed by the illustrator Worth Brehm in 1912. The last look of literature is Tobacco Road by Southern-born Erskine Caldwell. The novel is about the hard life of Georgia sharecroppers during the Depression, first published in 1932. Often the stories, articles, or magazine covers, illustrators are asked to deal with normal, everyday social events or behavior. Well, these can be as simple as two friends talking like this. Exceptional drawing by New Canaan artist Walter Dubois Richards, entitled Some of My Best Friends, appearing in Argosy magazine. In addition to an assortment of animals with apparently free rein about the living quarters, the two are toasting each other with glasses in their hands. Each appears to have a jar of liquid by their feet. Could this be a story about white lightning during the Prohibition years? Charles Dana Gibson and his famous Gibson Girls were always executed in pen and ink and played off human relations, usually the tug-of-war between men and women. The accompanying text reads, "The greatest game in the world It's Your Move, which appeared in Collier's magazine in 1903. In many of Gibson's illustrations, the woman, if she looks like a Gibson girl, has the upper hand. Here we see two elegant, lavishly dressed ladies engaged in idle conversation, which is a fairly common theme in the stories that appeared in magazines during the 20s and 30s. Images of folks gathering in conversation, or as this seems to depict, a heated debate, occur in the town's general store. Here are two of the community's probably colorful citizens going at it. A group of curious citizenry getting a laugh, and a mother with her child seemingly backing away from what might be inappropriate language. The event offering the greatest opportunity for socializing was the barn dance, and local musicians accompanying the square dance. Here we see, a possible intimate conversation, a small group sharing stories, a fiddler in the background, and a couple really high-stepping it. All component parts for a successful evening. Of course, all events of social circumstances are not joyous with happy endings. Entitled Survivors of the Flood, this graphically illustrates the aftermath of what appears to be coastal flooding, possibly the results of a hurricane. The story it illustrates will explain the saga. Executed 50 years ago by one of New York's finest artists, Harvey Dinerstein, entitled Terrorists, is frighteningly contemporary, with images today of our country's capital and college campuses. Often, great illustrators will intentionally not inject anything in the composition that dates the work, especially when it's a universal theme. Here we see broken glass, flags, motorcycle jacket and helmet, even hints of classical architecture behind the angry figures. This piece does not define a specific riot or event. One does not think of medical journals as a source of compelling illustrations. Entitled, What Are the Odds for Getting AIDS? Appeared in Emergency Medicine magazine in 1987. It needs no further description. The world of entertainment is where the audience and the illustrators both have fun in equal measure. It tests the illustrator's ability to achieve the best possible likeness of the figure being represented, or the opposite, as in this, the faintest suggestion. Who is it? It is listed as a prototype for Vanity Fair magazine, 1981. I don't know if it appeared in print, but study the eyes for a moment, carefully. It's Diana Ross of the Supremes. It's quite likely, in the whole world of entertainment, it's with rock singers where the artist can go nuts. How about this piece of visual magic created for United Artists when the two figures were together? Who are they? Bad boy behavior forced them to wave goodbye, and she went on to achieve global stardom while he had a total of 5 wives and died of cocaine overdose. Well, 5 wives would do that to you. Ike and Tina Turner. Feature films require posters, billboards, and images supporting articles written about them. It's a desirable assignment for the illustrator to receive and have their work widely exposed. This is an extraordinary likeness of Katharine Hepburn, Jane Fonda, and her dad, Henry Fonda for the beloved film On Golden Pond, released in 1981. It was the second highest grossing movie in America that year, and it earned Henry Fonda and Katharine Hepburn Best Actor Oscars. Jane Fonda purchased the right to the story specifically to do it with her father. In many ways, it was true to their relationship. The two had been estranged for years. One critic said, "The analysis of old age is sensitive, thought-provoking, and credible. It makes me want to reevaluate the relationships in my own family."
Introducing two cops only a mother could love. Meet Coffin Ed Johnson and Greg.
This is about as opposite from Golden Pond as you can get. The film poster is for the action comedy drama 1970 film Cotton Goes to Harlem, adapted from a book by the same name, written by Chester Himes, described as the best writer of mayhem since Raymond Chandler. The illustrator establishes mayhem in the finished poster. TV Guide. Once, in virtually every household in the country, had a very specific style of illustration when they featured a cast on their cover. This, of course, is MASH, which ran for 11 seasons from 1972 to 1983, and was developed after the feature film with the same name. It's still seen as reruns 40 years later. That's amazing. When a major star of iconic stature has been sketched, painted, and sculpted as often as John Wayne, and as an illustrator, your next assignment is for the shootest movie poster, you better get the likeness right. Add Jimmy Stewart and Lauren Bacall on the bottom corners, and you've got a challenging assignment. The likenesses of all three are convincing. The movie, released in 1976, was to be Wayne's last picture. The film character is dying of cancer, and so was Wayne at the time. At one point, they thought the production may have to be canceled.
Which way?
By 1975, I would guess this actor was approaching John Wayne's level of recognition. This bleak, stylized image is Robert Redford in Jeremiah Johnson. The story is one of a desire to be left alone, isolated in the mountains. The poster has some of these feelings. The United Artists poster for the movie Fiddler on the Roof, adapted from the play, is a marvelous display of joy and laughter, focusing on Topal as Tev and his struggles with life and the task of getting his daughters married. The images surrounding the dancing Tev weave into elements of the story. They are worthy of careful study. Rex Harrison and Audrey Hepburn were two well-recognized actors and prominently featured on the poster for the 1964 My Fair Lady musical adaptation of the 1956 stage adaptation of George Bernard Shaw's 1913 stage play Pygmalion. It was the second highest grossing film of 1964 and earned 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. To sound a little Shakespearean, the poster does not always maketh the movie. The movie Camelot, adopted from the stage play with Richard Burton, brought ornate, the poster is ornate as well, visually beautiful, romantic, and lavish production for a Hollywood musical, if that's what you like. A crisp comment from a critic was, "Content collapsed. This Camelot could be moved to Disneyland intact." Before leaving the movies, its hilarious and complex illustration in Collier's magazine must have accompanied a story about a catastrophe on a movie set. The hero cowboy, who does resemble John Wayne, is on the left, staring down at the bad guy, implying he accidentally hit him in a staged bar fight and he's out cold. The entire crew, including the director and others, along with other actors, standing around in disbelief. It's well animated with lots of action and individual attitudes portrayed in the figures. It actually makes me want to read the accompanying story. Stage productions are also in need of great illustration talent. When I first saw this magnificent image, I was intrigued. I didn't grasp the story right away. It is the full image for the Broadway musical Big River, based on Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. It ran for more than 1,000 performances and garnered 7 Tony Awards. This poster has many of the revivals of the classic madcap romp across the Atlantic on an ocean liner musical. The story is well known. The story behind the story is not. Originally, the story contained a bomb threat, a shipwreck, and human trafficking on a desert island. This doesn't really sound like a musical. But a few weeks before its debut, a fire on the passenger ship SS Morro Castle caused 138 deaths, and the producers of Anything Goes frantically undertook a rewrite of the offensive portions of the play. It worked. Of course, not all stage performances are Broadway quality. This wonderful illustration suggests a grateful audience when Last Act, Last Scene appeared in a Saturday Evening Post 1939 article. The gesture of the thespian is perfect. Now we jump from one form of acting, this is clever, we jump from one form of acting to another. It's called politics. They both do have one thing in common. We have to pay to witness both. Politics have always been a target for the illustrator's skills. And you must always start with Thomas Nast, born in 1840 and peppered the country with his sharp wit and pen from his desk at Harper's. We saw his brilliant shot at a New York City government with the image The Tammany Tiger Loose, 1871. Here is another, published the same year, entitled Moneybags, Boss Tweed. Nast was remarkable, influential with his razor-sharp wit in Heritage magazine, and was a contributor to bringing down Boss Tweed's rule. Arthur B. Frost, 11 years younger than Nast, turned his well-trained eyes towards representations of our elected officials. This brilliant illustration appeared in Collier's magazine in 1903, entitled Congressman's Day of Reckoning. It shows John Q. Public aggressively addressing his congressman, pointing at a document in his hand. The story behind the illustration certainly explains what it is, but it seems the congressman's constituency, seated in the room, are not in favor of it. Jumping ahead 70 years is this cartoon circa 1972 in the American Heritage magazine entitled Populist Bandwagon, with many of the political figures of the day, Nixon, Mondale, Wallace, and I think it's George Bush putting on his pants in the rear. The bandwagon effect is when an idea or belief is being followed because everybody else seems to be doing it, a term uniquely applied to politics. The New York Times printed an article in 1974 about President Ford's congressional opposition from the Democrats. Drawing upon the public's knowledge that President Ford played collegiate football at the University of Michigan, the accompanying illustration uses this as an analogy. During his short tenure, his detractors occasionally suggested he didn't wear his helmet often enough. Political potshots by illustrators may have exaggerated the stories they're contributing to, but this Lyndon Johnson image, referring to him as at sea, was not so uncomplicated as the drawing itself. Nixon and his henchmen do no better. On a Newsweek 1970 feature entitled In Search of a Foreign Policy. Look magazine coverage of John Kennedy's Democratic Convention is significantly more charitable. I suspect at the direction of the art director. Returning to singling out a few of the early giants of illustration, we're looking at the work of Harvey Dunn, born in 1884 in a prairie shanty in South Dakota, followed by education in a one-room schoolhouse. This extraordinary work, appearing in Ladies' Home Journal in 1916, entitled The Tea Party, captures a brittle, almost comedic series of postures and gestures accompanying, as it says in the title, idle conversations. Dunn was a highly successful illustrator, but also devoted much of his energy to teaching and creating his legacy in younger artists. He continued throughout much of his life, visiting the barren landscape of South Dakota, and many of his works reflect his childhood home, like this penetrating look at survival in the windswept Dakota Prairie Territory, entitled The Prairie is My Garden. Much of Harvey Dunn's work was donated to South Dakota State University. His partner in forming the Leonia School of Illustration in 1914, Leonia, New Jersey, was the illustrator Charles S. Chapman, a true unique painter with a fondness for towering trees in deep, dark woods, often with diminutive figures to give scale to the composition. This example, entitled Red Woods, was published in Ladies' Home Journal in 1921. Here is another example entitled In Deep Woods. Among many of the distinguished illustrators who studied here was Dean Cornwell, whom we've seen and talked about. This is a complex piece showing people disembarking from an ocean liner. Howard Pyle was a contemporary of Harvey Dunn, equally gifted and a powerful instructor. We've already seen his Nation Makers. He was also a writer of books like The Adventures of Robin Hood. His deep interest in historical themes is seen in this work entitled Alexander Hamilton Addressing the Mob, appearing in Harper's in 1884. In the 1920s, the distributors of art prints sponsored a global survey to define the most popular artists in the world. Maxfield Parrish came in third, behind Van Gogh and Cézanne. By 1925, it was estimated 1 out of every 4 households in the United States had a Parrish print on their walls, often this one entitled Daybreak. His work was joyful, imaginative, and unique, like this piece from Scribner's Magazine, 1925, titled Knave of Hearts, Two Pastry Cooks. Even though Maxfield Parrish was Hollywood handsome, here is how he portrayed himself, a whimsical look at oneself. I snuck in this beautiful piece entitled Cozy Corner because the artist's story touches us all. Francis Millay was born in 1846, served as a drummer boy in the Civil War at 15 years old. A Harvard graduate, brilliant, a writer, earned several awards for his paintings, was a decorated combat artist during the Russo-Turkish War, translated works by Tolstoy. He died on April 12th, 1912, at age 63. Do you know that date? Think. He boarded a vessel in Cherbourg on April 10th, the Titanic. The next illustrator to look at is Dean Cornwell, a member of the Golden Age of illustration. Prolific, in constant demand, this piece has the sophisticated paint quality of an accomplished Impressionist painter. Yet, it accompanied a story in Red Book magazine in 1913 and is entitled A Conversation. The figure is on the phone, supporting the storyline. Here is Cornwell at his best in drama, action, and it must be a great story, entitled Mississippi Riverboat. The vessel is the Robert E. Lee, and Cornwell's depiction is during the classic riverboat race between the Natchez and the Robert E. Lee. The last image is tension-filled immigrants on Ellis Island awaiting customs clearance. One can speculate the origin and social class of the figures. The very proper lady in the center is likely British. This fairly startling image actually represents two icons in their respective, although worlds apart, fields of expertise. This illustration appeared in Vanity Fair and likely accompanied an article on American Dance. The title is Sally Rand versus Martha Graham. Fortunately, when I showed this image to my wife, I was able to say I had no idea who Sally Rand was. She was a famous American burlesque dancer during the mid-30s and continued to perform her famous ostrich feather fan dance and her balloon bubble dance into the 70s. Deeply in debt at the time of her passing at 75 years old, Sammy Davis Jr. stepped in with a $10,000 check to settle her financial problems. Martha Graham, of course, was a legendary modern dancer and choreographer whose style reshaped American dance and taught for over 70 years. The last subject is pretty much exclusive to the illustrator. The fine artist rarely poaches the territory of romance, lust, or just plain cheesecake, as it became called. Now, before going further, we must examine the great Howard Chandler Christie's painting called The American Girl, painted in 1912. This was Christie's effort to illustrate the perfect girl. Clearly, tastes have changed. Often the illustrator's image is intentionally one of coy innocence and the slightest suggestiveness, as in this work entitled Cat-Eyed Woman in Saturday Evening Post in 1953. Well, pushing the suggestive look A bit further is the hat check girl, whose sultry expression and the exchange of money add to the allure of the image. The next image gets a bit more to the point, beautifully executed, while the woman's face appears to express a feigned surprise at her present circumstance. This image was in a 1950s issue of Saturday Evening Post, communicating somewhat similarly, but perhaps more direct, is Girl with a Glow, providing a visual interpretation of the 1955 story in Saturday Evening Post. When this image is accompanied by the line, "I'm not posing for that account anymore," this Esquire magazine article triggers the viewer's imagination. Actually, the fairly light touch created by the illustrator suggests there might be a bit of humor in the story. When I saw this, I wasn't sure if it was an advertisement for bathtubs or perhaps to encourage people to read more. I was further confused by the title, Murder for $1 Million. When a nude painting is executed with taste and sophistication, displaying a quiet, private moment alone, and not displaying an uncomfortable narrative with it, one thinks it should be in a magnificent period frame hanging on a museum wall, not on the pages of Cosmopolitan magazine in 1946. It's beautiful. The missing narrative is found in this piece when it reads, "What do you say when offered $1 million? The attractive young lady has just received an offer for $1 million to share her company with an obviously wealthy man. She's contemplating what exactly does she have to do for all this." It probably makes for good reading in McCall's magazine, 1961. As we close out Episode 3, and the illustrator's expertise, it's interesting to see examples of paintings that they've done showing themselves painting the figure. All four of these artists underwent rigorous training, and very often they are more skilled at painting the figure than their fine arts counterparts. As you've seen and will continue to see, the illustrator is required to address a broader range of emotions, activities, and situations which demand these skills. We look forward to seeing you in Episode 4.